I have around me three very, very important people who will share their thoughts. I'm just directing traffic today. Always wanted to be a traffic cop. And they're going to share some insights with you, initially for just a short period, 5 minutes each. And then we'll open the floor immediately. Unfortunately, one of our speakers will have to leave early because there's something really important happening just down the road. And so we will not hold him from that. Let me introduce them in the order that is sitting from my right, from my far right. It's a pleasure, Member of Parliament, Eddie Pugh, to welcome you. Eddie, as I said, is a Member of Parliament and former Secretary General of the South African Council of Churches. So he obviously brings a particular background with him as well. And then next to Eddie, we have Eleanor Deploy, works at the Institute as the project leader for our Ashley Creel Youth Leadership Development Project. It's a mouthful, but it's a massively important project. And Eleanor hopefully will bring some perspectives on the youth voice and maybe the voice that is often not present, the gender female voice. And then on my left, I have Reverend Dr. Lionel Lowe, retired lecturer in social work at the University of Cape Town, former program manager at the Center for Conflict Resolution, and former chief of staff in the office of Premier Ibrahim Rasool. So as you can see, we have three people who clearly have opinions, and my job really is not to hog the floor, but just simply to say that the issue of social cohesion is a national imperative. It is driven by the national government and the Department of Art and Culture in particular. And a number of initiatives have taken place. In 2012, there was this massive social cohesion conference in Kliptown, and IGR was very present there. I think 4 of us attended. And it was a watershed moment, and so a lot of things have come out of it. But social cohesion is still an important thing. We hear it in all the speeches, we hear it in the discourse between people. And the whole idea of social cohesion is that's supposed to be the glue that holds this country, this society together. And especially given our background and our context of diversity on so many levels. And so the question really is, when we talk about social cohesion and the whole idea of people finding common ground, we have asked ourselves the question, so 2 things that normally feeds anything. The one is your experience. Do people on the ground, do people in South Africa have the experience of this group that brings us together? And of course, the second thing that I think is important is, do we have the example? Because bear in mind, social cohesion is something abstract for most of us. It's this term. No one knows what it looks like. And so we're forging this thing into something that people can see, touch, feel, and identify with. It is something we did not have before. And that's why we look at our experiences, but also to the examples to help us find this glue. And it is for that matter that we felt we needed to have this discussion. The question that we're posing today is, does Parliament have a role to play in promoting and fostering social cohesion? And speaking of Parliament, I think it's appropriate to ask our Member of Parliament, Mr. Eddie Pugh, to take the podium with his 5 minutes of input.
Good afternoon to everybody here. Thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this discourse. Thank you to Martin Up as well. I am mindful of the fact that you have two-thirds of this podium being very interesting people in terms of the history. You have a priest and you have a politician, and you can't allocate 5 minutes to either of them.
That's why I did stopwatch.
That of my slate, I want to say that chapter 4 of our Constitution states in chapter 42.3 that the National Assembly is elected to represent the people and to ensure government by the people. It goes further to say that this will be done by providing a national forum for public consideration of issues. This refers specifically to the National Assembly. But as you well know, that Parliament is made up of both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. So in section 42.4, the Constitution goes further to say that the National Council of Provinces represents the provinces to ensure that provincial interests are taken into account in the national sphere of government. And then it also qualifies that to say that this can be done by providing a national forum for public consideration of issues affecting the provinces. Now, anyone who understands law will know that in the drafting of the Constitution, these words are every word is important. And in terms of the NA, it refers to consideration of issues, and it does it as well in the NCOP. It doesn't say participation. However, what we have seen happening throughout our 21 years of history in this country is that public participation and consideration are key to the operations of Parliament. And this is spelled out in the Constitution. So the politicians are not doing anybody any favor by allowing such participation to happen. In answer to the question then, the short answer would be to say that yes, indeed, Parliament has an important role to play in terms of social cohesion. But our Constitution should also be read and understood in the context where we say that such public participation must enhance openness and accountability. If it just happens for the sake of it happening, it has no significance, it has no meaning at all. Such participation, in terms of my understanding and experience, indeed contributes towards openness of power. Questions can be asked as to whether it actually contributes towards accountability. Because in government you also have the executive and you have the legislature. Now the public can participate through Parliament by putting pressure on the legislature to reach out to the executive. But there is no direct linkage in our constitutional democracy through which the public can hold the executive accountable. But this participation is also further strengthened by an annual initiative in Parliament, what we call taking Parliament to the people. The interesting thing about taking Parliament to the people is that provinces bid for Parliament to listen down. I can share with you that for this year, the Parliament of the People would happen in Oudtshoorn in the Western Cape. The interesting thing that I want to mention in the same breath is that It is not a matter of taking Parliament to the people that have supported or voted for the ruling party. No. It is taking Parliament to the people regardless of the people's political party choices. This institutional outreach is also further strengthened by oversight as a programmatic arrangement in government. We have what we call provincial oversights that are done by the National Council of Provinces, but we also have oversight on the different departments of government. That can be done either by members of the Portfolio Committee or by members of the Select Committee. In that way, making sure that we keep the bureaucrats in government to be accountable to the legislature and through the legislature to the voters of this country. Committees of Parliament, and in the NCOP we have select committees, in the NA we have portfolio committees, is built on public participation. Any member of public can at any time, provided you have the necessary check through the security checkpoints, visit any committee, except for when the committee calls a closed meeting, like the Ethics Committee or the Committee on Intelligence and Security may decide to convene a closed meeting because of the sensitivity of the matters under discussion. The chairperson of any of the committees may at any time call any person or organization to meetings of the committee to come and make representation or just to participate in the meeting. My time is up. Equal values are important. I'm concluding, you will allow me 1 minute extra, Chair, to say that it is important that we recognize that in it all respect for the aspirations and general needs of all people of South Africa is therefore a political imperative. South Africa belongs to all its people. And this year, when we in the ANC are celebrating the Freedom Charter, we are particularly mindful of how it is formulated in that historic document adopted in 1955. We must acknowledge the reality of race and class and the tensions that exist in all societies, particularly around issues of race and class and how that impacts on social cohesion. Chairperson, I would have wanted to spell out a little bit more some of the challenges that I see civil society confronted with in social cohesion, but would rather raise a during question.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKeel. Eleanor, can I give you the floor?
Good afternoon, everyone. Perhaps I'll just start my short input with what happened last week. So last week, a colleague and myself had a conversation with young people from the Western Cape on the National Draft Youth Policy for 2014 to 2019. And we encouraged everybody to kind of talk about it and dissect the policy a little bit and see what is being said about youth and of Lesayanda. And one of the interesting things that came out of the conversation was the fact that young people asked, what about social cohesion? There's a small section on social cohesion within the youth policy, but not a lot is being said about it really. And also, there aren't real concrete steps as to what is being proposed. How are we going to be doing this? How are we going to bring social cohesion about? And I think just in the interest of time, I'm just going to read through some of the points that I want to make, and also some of the questions that I'd like to leave with you and to think about. So given that social cohesion has been a buzzword for some time in all sectors, it's perhaps unsurprising that there's relatively little consensus over the meaning of social cohesion, or as illustrated by last week's conversation, the mechanics of designing a common program for a collective future. So for some, it refers primarily to the ability to construct a collective identity and a sense of shared belonging, which in turn can help nurture strong social capital and community networks. Others emphasize equality of opportunity, reduced marginalization, and the eradication of social exclusions. but without a universally accepted definition. Descriptors often vary substantially depending on the ideological orientation of individual or the organizations who use it. In this context, I think that it's important to acknowledge that choosing definitions is important and that these differing definitions influence key debates and recommended policy actions, particularly pertaining to the quality of life and well-being. But I think that it's also important in relation to the question that was posed, whether Parliament is a vehicle for social cohesion. I think that it's important to mention the symbiotic relationship between social cohesion and the nature and quality of societal and political institutions. In cases where societal and political institutions are weak and or serve to protect and promote only the interests of particular groups, social cohesion is likely to be at low levels. Of course, low levels of social cohesion will impact negatively on the nature and quality of societal and political institutions. Conversely, where societal and public institutions are strong, inclusive and designed to function in the interest of society as a whole, social cohesion is enhanced, which in turn strengthens the inclusive nature of these institutions. And I think that to draw this input to a close, I would like to leave some questions with you to think about as we continue the conversation. So how realistically is social cohesion conceived? Is it even possible to identify a shared set of values around which we can all mobilize? How exactly can policy address the deep fault lines of social polarization, economic inequality, and sometimes even our diversity that can at times be a bit of a problem for us, to ensure that each one of us is heard or feels recognized? Is social cohesion impossible in modern capitalist societies given the apparently unsolvable tension between economic inequality and aspirations for social justice? And also, fundamentally what social cohesion does and tries to do, and this is also a conversation that we had this morning with colleagues, is that it restores dignity. It's a dignifying, it's a way of restoring dignity. So yeah, that's my input.
Thank you, Eleanor. Well done. 5 minutes. Short.
Pressure's on.
So all I'm saying, politicians and preachers learn from the youth. Thank you very much, Eleanor. I'll say something after the spoken panel. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Usually I would sit there and I feel more comfortable sitting there than here. Eddie has already referred to Article 42 in the Constitution. Just to add, it also, that part on the National Assembly concludes by saying also by passing legislation and by scrutinizing and overseeing executive action. And then there's the preamble to the Constitution. And I think the Constitution as a whole mandates that social cohesion should be promoted. But as with so many things in South Africa, the constitutional architecture is sound, but the incumbents entrusted with the responsibility of giving lifeblood to it don't always deliver the goods. I have one flaw that I want to identify, and that's proportional representation. And I think it served a very significant purpose when we set out on this democratic path. But our electoral processes are maturing, and a reassessment was necessary, and that was done in the recommendations of the Van Zyl-Slabbert committee. The ruling party did not have the courage to implement its recommendations. And so I would suggest it's a flaw that we have in looking at the role of Parliament in building social cohesion. But we're also dealing with one-party dominance. And that's why the attention has to be focused on this one party, much more than the opposition parties. Now, to get onto a party list, you must have demonstrated party loyalty to qualify to get onto the list, no matter what the party does. And we have also become aware of the factionalism within the ruling party. And so it's a question of where your loyalty lies. Then, if you qualify to get onto the list, to get a seat in Parliament, you come out of this whole process that has been very divisive, fraught with all sorts of dynamics. The divisions in that process are also exacerbated by an ethos that has been cultivated, that when you get a seat in Parliament, it's not just a reward for party loyalty, but also the beginning of economic prosperity. It is having your turn at the trough to eat. Now we are witnessing the extent to which the ruling party has closed the ranks in support of number one. The litany of obvious tension, obvious reasons why he is unsuitable as a national leader is endless. Yet this single party dominance prevents an arrest of this deteriorating national ethos. In Parliament, therefore, national interests have become subservient to party interests. While lip service is paid to social cohesion and a compliance summit was held last year, the narrow interests of the party and its particular corrupt leadership at this time have to be served. Therefore, there's a sharpened dissonance between the constitutional mandate on the one hand and the conduct of the ruling party on the other hand. Consequently, opposition parties have to sharpen their reaction to the ruling party's conduct. The result is increasing acrimony, which is not in the interest of building social cohesion. Last week, one of the commentators on the radio referred to an event in Russia. He said Stalin arrived at an event. Everybody stood up and they applauded. And the applause continued and continued. And at one stage, one of the people present simply took her seat. She was a worker, and as a result of her taking a seat, while everybody was standing and applauding, landed her in jail for 10 years. I am saying party loyalty is like mob action. Individuality and rationality are lost in the process. Because we have to have party loyalty to be in Parliament with this single party dominance, I don't think that there's a significant contribution being made to fulfilling that constitutional mandate to promote social cohesion.
Thank you very much, Lionel. Let's give our speakers.